to the consistent adult in their life. Unfortunately, many of the kids that we work with, they have a need, they signal discomfort, and their need is not met, or it's met in a way that does not make them feel secure, trusting, and attached to their adult. So they don't get that comfort signal. And we know that when that happens, kids either stop signaling discomfort altogether when they have a need, or they start signaling discomfort in ways that are really unattractive and unappreciated to other people in their lives. And that's where we see some of that negative behavior. It may become really inconsistent behavior, but we wanted you guys to think back to the little girl in the video, even the little boy in the video. Maybe even consider the adults in the video and how they maybe were voicing needs, signaling discomfort, and their needs are not being met, and so they're not able to build that attachment. I'm gonna skip that and let Alondra come back. Tonight, Alondra is doing most of the fun things. That's why when she's in the front of the screen, I have to jump in so you guys don't associate me with the sometimes boring theories. But she's gonna jump back in and do a quick activity with you guys. Thank you, Ashley. Okay, next we have the minimum sufficient level of care activity. And in this activity, we will be using the stamp option in your Zoom. So the way you are able to access that is if you go to the top of your screen and select View Options, you will be able to see the word Annotate on there. And if you select that, you will get a few options, which is an arrow, check mark, an X, a star, a heart, and a question mark. Good job. I see some of you guys are utilizing that. All right. Is everybody okay to go to the activity?
I'm not sure how to reach that on my phone.
Okay. So give Ashley just a second. Ashley will try to look at that on her phone to see.
Okay.
All right. Just for the purpose of time, we are going to go ahead and continue. So in this activity, I want you guys to take a look at this picture and identify the needs in this picture by putting a stamp to what you think that the needs that are being met in this picture. You can use the heart or the star or the check mark. I do not use the arrow because it only allows you to put one arrow on there. So just stick to either a heart or a star or an X.
Okay, I'm not seeing where the stars and the heart are.
Okay, Amy, if you go to the top of your screen, it says View Options.
No, it
There
doesn't.
should be a drop down.
Okay.
Select. Okay, in that drop down, it should say Annotate.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Yep.
Figured it out. Ashley figured it out. She's gonna come in and let you know. Okay, so actually it was easy-ish. I don't know how to get back off of it. But on mine, there was just a little pencil at the bottom left of the screen, but I have an iPhone.
Yes. Yes, that's what I have.
And that let me make some selections. So I made the red scribble. If you do better than a red scribble, yay!
Awesome. I got it.
Mine won't let me do anything.
Were you able to access the Annotate on there?
No.
Did you select View Options and from the scroll down, select Annotate?
It doesn't show it on here. It says original size and exit full screen.
Okay. Let's see. If you'll kind of lightly glide your mouse over where it says you are screen sharing at the top, another box should pop down. Do you see that, Sandy? And it should say View Options to the right.
And it doesn't show it. It's got application when I push share. It says, do
You
you
should be
want
looking at the
to
share
share
at the top. The share at the top of your screen. It's all right, Heather. We are actually going to do another one of these activities. We give you a little bit more time then to try to work through some of these technical difficulties. Let's move on with this one though. So let's talk about what you guys selected on here. Does somebody want to jump in and say what it is that they selected and why it meets the needs of the family?
I think one of the obvious ones is the food. That's one of the big ones, and then another one that I had put was the dad being there, and like the son obviously glad to see him, so they have a good relationship.
That's great. That's great observation. Anybody else want to share? Sarah, what did you? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, it looks like they have electricity.
Yes.
Notice that the children have toys. I see a puzzle and a skateboard.
Yeah. What about you, Allie? I know you were going to say something.
We're doing needs that aren't being met, right?
Needs that are not being met in this photo, yes.
Yeah, I noticed like that the mom it looks like she's smoking inside the house.
Okay.
And then I noticed too, my kids are climbers, and I noticed those drawers were open, and mine would be like up on top of there and on the stove in like a minute.
Yes, as toddlers and little babies do. Okay, and we'll have one more. Pooja, what did you select?
I picked the dishes that are all undone. It just kind of represents like an unsanitary household.
Okay, yeah, that are all great observations. Before we get too much in depth in this one, I do want to go ahead and go to the other one and select the positive things in each of in this photo, which is the same picture. Ashley is going to clean that one up for us and then start to let you guys annotate. Will you let me see who else is in the... Sandy, were you able to figure it out on the annotate?
No, it won't let me do anything, sweetie.
No. I'm so sorry. Technology can be very difficult at times.
I know, right? But I see a lot of good things and a lot of bad things.
Well, you're more than welcome to share too. You may not be able to select it on there, but you can share. Okay, guys, I see that our page is filling up. Let's talk about all these positives that we're seeing on here. I know that on the other one, we've selected the food and that Nathan said Dad was there and that the child was happy to see him. What other things are positive in here?
There's a bottle for the baby.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sandy, go ahead.
There's a bottle for the baby on the coffee table.
Yeah. Clara, do you want to share? We can help you unmute. Ashley will go ahead and unmute you. Just 1 minute, I'm sorry. See, Sandy, it's not just you. We also have technical difficulties on our end.
I'm glad it's just not me.
All right, Clara, if you want to share, what do you think is positive in this photo? I'm so sorry, we cannot hear you. No. Okay, I'm so sorry. Just to keep us on track with time, we will have to move on. But those were all great answers. I did notice that some of you guys put hearts around the skateboard. Like I said, there was food on the table. There's family pictures. Those are all great examples. I do want to say with both of these, you know, even though we see that this house can be cluttered and that the dishes aren't done or fixed, what may be, you know, not the ideal or how you may keep your home, it still may meet the minimum sufficient level of care for that child. You know, the child is still receiving food, they still have care. Yes, the mom is smoking in the home, but at least it's not drugs or making meth. So, you know, we want to make sure that when we go and visit our children in the home, we look for those kind of things. You know, we look that the child has food, that the child has a safe place to sleep. But we want to make sure that we're not judgmental or biased when we observe their environment. You know, as much as we would love to give our children everything, families at times don't have that. So as long as they are meeting their needs, they are in a safe place. I'm going to invite Ashley back to the screen, and she will talk a little bit more in depth about minimum sufficient level of care and
The best interest
principle.
Thank you, Alondra, and thank you guys for playing along with that activity. So we love this activity when we do it in person, and I kept trying to figure out how we could do it in person, or not in person, but virtually. And I was asked to do this on a webinar that I was part of, and I loved it. No. She's saying, did I mess up? No, she did great. I messed up. No, my clicker's not working. Will you click me to the next slide? So we want to talk to you guys about the minimum sufficient level of care and the best interest principle. We're going to talk about those sort of in tandem. She's just flying through and she's trying to get you guys to a break. But no, minimum sufficient. So we're gonna come back to the break, don't worry. But when we talk about the minimum sufficient level of care, that's something that we will come back to over and over. And when you ask us questions as your supervisors, when you're handling a case, we'll come back to, does this meet the minimum sufficient level of care? Because we want you guys to remember all of the things that you see on your screen right now, that it is very traumatic for a child to be removed from their home, that it is very traumatic for a child to be involved in the court system for an extended period of time. It's traumatic for them to switch schools. It's traumatic for them to have 10 or 15 different social workers during their life. So even if their home is not ideal, we still have to take all of those things into consideration and decide if the home that they're in and the situation that they're in falls within that minimum sufficient level of care. So these are some of the factors that you can consider. The physical, emotional, and developmental needs of the child, are those met? That's what we want you to go back and understand, those ages and stages, so that you know that the needs of a 2-year-old are not the same as the needs of a 12-year-old. So if maybe there are little Legos on the ground, we don't have to worry about a 12-year-old choking on those, but a 2-year-old we might. They have different needs, and we want to make sure that all of those are met. Does the parent's behavior comply with accepted child rearing practices? So this doesn't necessarily mean what you think is acceptable. So what I think is acceptable is not the same as maybe what Alondra thinks is acceptable. I'll share something that we came across. Our kids are at work with us most of the time. We were out with my kids and her son one day this week, and one of my kids said, I need to go to the potty, and I said, okay, go ahead. And I said, take your brother and go. And she looked stunned. And she has 2 children, but one of them is a baby. And she said, I would never send my son by himself to the bathroom. And I said, well, I don't send my son by himself to the bathroom. I send him with one or both of his brothers. So those are practices that she did not find acceptable. I found it acceptable. She didn't, but it's not something that's removal worthy. It's not something that would prompt you to say this child is being neglected. Hopefully, if you feel that way, I'm sorry. You can address that in the chat box. But also, is the behavior of the parent reasonable within the limits of the community? And this is really important, especially for people who maybe are from out of town and move here, and also to remember with families who are out of town and move here. So if you're not from this area, you might find things extremely odd, like the fact that I talk to everyone that I meet. I find that if I go further north when I travel, other people are a lot more weirded out and put out about the fact that I talk to them on the elevator. So that's not an acceptable practice in every community, but it's pretty acceptable here. We find the same thing with many families who are not from our area but move here. We have lots of refugee populations and families that are not from here that have practices that are very different from ours. One I can think of is I think a lot of Burmese families give their babies water in bottles. That's not something that we do normally. We don't give our babies when they're 3 or 4 months old water in their bottles, but Burmese families do because they don't want them to get dehydrated. Is it acceptable within their community? Absolutely. Is it abusive or neglectful? No. It's not something that I did with my children, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't meet the minimum sufficient level of care for that child. And that's what we want to focus on when we're working with these families, is not just, is this what I think is perfect? Is this what I would want for my child? Is this what I think the best thing is ever to do with kids? We want the best for these kids and we want to set high standards, but we also want to keep in mind that there is a level of care that is sufficient to meet their needs, even if it doesn't meet our high standards of what we think is appropriate. We want to keep that in mind, that not everyone comes from the background that we come from. I'm going to ask Alondra to go to the next slide so we can start talking about the best interest principle. So is there another one? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there we go. So with the best interest principle, this is just another reminder to keep all of those factors in the back of your mind, to think about that minimum sufficient level of care and to weigh that against the other experiences in the child's life and what may happen. An example I'll give you is a court report I was working on with one of my advocates today. There is a 16-year-old child who is in a home where substance abuse is present and the child is talked to very poorly. The child wants to stay in the home though and promises that she will run away if she has to live somewhere else. So when we talk about that case, when I talk about that with my advocate, we often talk about what is the minimum sufficient level of care. She's 16. Is she provided decent care even though her mother is substance using? Is that still okay? We weigh that against what would be the alternative. Her living on the run, her being placed in an inpatient facility again for about the 7th time in her life after she's completed the programs. And it's a difficult decision to make. We did not make one. We didn't even make a recommendation. We just asked the court to pursue finding more information so we could find the best interest. But when we talk about the best interest principle, this is what we want to know. We want to know if the child's needs are being met. We want to know if they're meeting that minimum sufficient level of care, because there is a minimum. Even for people that are different from us, there is a minimum. We want to take that into consideration, and we want to think about whether what we are suggesting is in the best interest of the child. So now I'm going to throw Alondra for a loop. We skipped over a break, but I do want to take just about a 3-minute break. So she clicked the side forward, and I want her to go back about 3 slides. There we go. So I said 5 minutes. We're going to take, make it 3 so you actually get back in 5 minutes. Stretch, turn your camera off, use the restroom, and hop back on so we can finish out on time tonight. Hi guys, I'm just gonna say hello. So the people who are sitting in front of their computer and just, yeah, like Pooja was just sitting there with her camera off so she could stretch. Yeah, you guys can pop back on when you hear my voice. We got some amazing feedback from most of you guys through the evaluations and through the Canvas app that we were a little rushed at the end of last week's training, which we absolutely were, trying to fit that information in. And we're trying to prevent that feeling tonight. We don't want you to feel like you have to race, your mind has to race to keep up with how fast I'm talking. We also don't want you to feel like you're missing out on any of the information. So we're gonna go ahead and get started again. We have just a few more topics to cover before we finish out for the night. So I'm going to ask Alondra to go ahead and share our screen again, just so we can talk really briefly about family strengths and weaknesses. And then we're gonna come back to this gallery and spend just a couple of minutes talking about how we can make sure to try and see our families from a strengths perspective. So thank you, Alondra. When we talk about strengths and weaknesses, it is sometimes much easier to identify weaknesses in the families that we work with because they are what introduces that family to us. We didn't meet this family as their child was receiving an award at their school program or because they just won a pageant or hit a home run at their baseball game. We met this family because someone filed a petition and the judge deemed it appropriate for us to get involved with them at the court level. So we are already kind of seeing them at their worst, and we want to make sure that as we are progressing to get to know the family, we make every effort possible to see the family from a strengths-based perspective. And we talk a lot about this, and to make sure that we don't just view the family from that deficit lens, from this is the worst thing that they did and we're going to judge them by that from the beginning, but through a strengths perspective or through a resource lens where you can identify the strengths of their family and help them build on that strength and work to overcome any deficit through their strength. Alondra, would you go ahead? I know you just got it all fixed. I'm sorry, I talked too fast, but would you go ahead and stop screen sharing so we can go back to that gallery view? And I would encourage you guys now to share a little bit about how we can do that. If we think about the family from the removed video, or we think about the family in the blue case, what are some ways that it may be easy to see them from the deficit lens, but how we could flip that to see them from a strengths or resource perspective? It's a hard question. I'll take a couple more seconds to see if somebody volunteers. Everybody's like, no, it's 7:40. We've been on here for an hour and 40 minutes and I do not volunteer. So I'll share a little bit. I'll share just, oh, Terry wants to go. Yay, Terry. All right, Terry.
I had a case one time where there were drugs. Parents had their children taken away because of drugs. And but every time I talked to the kids and asked them what they wanted, they just wanted to be with their dad. They just wanted to be with their dad. And that was something that just really struck me, was they loved their dad so much. And I realized that there are a lot of families that, you know, they fall in some way. They have something that is tearing them up, but they have that really, really strong bond. And so I've told people before when they said, well, I'm afraid to be a CASA and I'm afraid it'll all be terrible. And I said, I have had families that love their kids. The kids love their parents more than anything, and they have a really strong family. They just have drug issues. So I guess if you focused on, you know, the drug issue, you'd be really negative. But if you look at the love that they had for each other, they really were remarkable families.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Terry. I wholeheartedly agree. I think there are several other professionals on our call tonight who have had experiences with families who are struggling, who have been through really difficult situations. And we see them during those bad times where they're in the height of the substance abuse, or the domestic violence has gotten so severe that the police have gotten involved. Their kids have been removed for them. I know there's some medical professionals on here, so maybe it's that they're in the hospital, or they had to get some kind of care because they were physically abusive to their child. But it is encouraging, Terry, to hear from someone who is an experienced advocate that even in those situations where there are unthinkable things happening in homes, it is possible to see that the families do have strengths, that they do love their children, that they are doing all that they can to meet their needs, to reform their habits, to turn over a new leaf. And is everything always 100% awesome? No, I would say, Terry, in some of those cases, they've had backsliding moments, they relapsed, they yelled at you or the child or somebody else. But if we look at them from that strengths-based perspective, we still give them the opportunity to be people, to be humans, and to work with them towards making things better in their life. So we encourage you guys to do that when you're working with kids who are having a hard time, who are Susan stealing mopeds and doing crazy things like some of the kids in your case have been doing lately, that they're still wonderful kids. They still have great aspects. The same is true for parents. Even when they're substance abusing, maybe they're still able to come to their visits. And if we choose to give honor to the strengths, then we're better able to serve them and help them through the weaknesses. All right, Alondra, if you'll pop that screen, I say pop up like it's really easy. She actually has to click several buttons for us to be able to screen share. So thank you. And if you'll move to the next slide, and we will start next, please. Maybe a couple. Okay, we're here at resilience. Back one more. Okay, we're at resilience because we're going to start talking just for a few minutes about working with children who are being abused, identifying that physical abuse, or identifying risk factors for abuse and neglect as well. We want to start with resilience because we always like to start with resilience when we're going to talk about abuse and the impact of abuse. We're going to talk a lot more about resilience next week. We're going to really dive into that and talk about adverse childhood experiences. But tonight, what we want you to know is that resilience is very individual, and that we hear often, kids are resilient. Oh, they'll be fine. Kids are resilient. And some kids are resilient, and some kids are not as resilient. But we know that resilience can be reinforced. It can be built in children, and it's not always something that just happens, that kids are just born being resilient. There are factors involved that allow them to become resilient and to stand up and be able to make it through those adverse experiences that they do have. You'll jump to the next slide. One more. So at CASA, while we're on this one, and we say that a lot, that resilience is built in one major way by having someone in their life who is always there for them. You guys would have heard about that in your pre-work video. Now we're jumping through. Our internet connection is unstable. Oh my goodness. So if you lose us, then bear with us. We're going to do the best we can. But that CASAs can be the change that helps the child become resilient or reinforce their resilience when they are at risk of being abused or neglected again, or they're already in a home where they're experiencing that. Okay, I'm going to invite Alondra up to talk about the risk factors a little bit. I'm going to stand off to the side and give her most of the screen, but stay right here too as we go through and talk about some of the risk factors for child abuse and neglect.
Thank you, Ashley. So on your screen, you'll see some different risk factors that a family may experience. Some of them being child-related risk factors. So as Ashley and I were talking about this earlier today, she was mentioning some of those to me, and it really clicked in my mind about how when children are small, they go through that age or that stage where they cry constantly. It's called purple, or
The period of purple crying.
purple crying.
She'd not heard of that, but if you have, it's like the colic phase. They used to, so you can see my face. When babies had colic, it's that 6 weeks to 6 months. Sometimes they have colic, but they go through that phase where they cry so hard their faces turn purple. The period of purple crying.
So during that stage, families can get really stressed and really overwhelmed with how to, calm their infant down. And a lot of families don't realize that they can just, call that extra support that they may have, or put their child in the crib and let them cry it out, close the door, and just put that child in a safe place. That is one risk factor as related to the child. Next is parent or caretaker risk factors. So the caretakers may be going through a stressful situation that is, extra hard on them, and just having to take care of your infant or your child causes extra overwhelming stress. And it's important to make sure that they have that support that they need to have that healthy balance and to help take care of their children. I know that with my son, I am very grateful that we do have my husband's mother that's able to help me whenever I need help with my kids, especially right now during COVID, that childcare and school is an unknown. Next is social stimulation factors. So just also making sure that, like I was saying, having that social support and that support system, whether that be grandparents, friends, relatives, just making sure that they utilize the support system that they have, and ensuring that you also explain to parents, reach out to that support system, lean on them for support. I'm going to jump to some triggering factors. I was mentioning my child's grandmother. Even though she is very helpful, at times she does like to step in and give parents advice and things like that. And it can be, a triggering factor for me to kind of be like, no, I'm the mom, I need to be the one that places the rules, and I need to be the one that gets on to him. But it's also important to understand that she is trying to help and just, help me out. And she recognizes that that can make me stressful as well. So on our next slide, with our internet being so slow, is recognizing child abuse and neglect. So as a CASA volunteer, we know that we cannot determine child abuse or neglect. It is up to the court to decide that. So we can go and make observations and report, and that is what we are here to do. But ultimately, the judge in the court will decide if it's abuse and neglect. So next is the recognizing the factors, or recognizing the signs of child abuse and neglect. And we're going to go through these fairly quickly. So some factors of physical abuse are bite marks, bruising. Especially I want to bring to your attention on small children. Children can be bruised, especially as they're walking, usually in the knee area, in the elbow, things like that. But you want to make sure that you look for, or if you see bruising, on the cheeks, or bruising behind the legs, places where they usually wouldn't get hurt as they're learning to walk. Sexual abuse, some signs with that is wet bedding. Other signs may be, just kind of age-appropriate knowledge, talking about things that they shouldn't know yet according to their age. And so emotional abuse is witnessing parents just aggressively talking to their children, calling them names, belittling them, situations like that. And then neglect, you know, not allowing them to have appropriate meals. And by appropriate meals, I mean like taking away meals as a punishment, or, you know, leaving them locked up in their room. It's a fine line between discipline and neglect. So we always have to be well aware of what it is that we're witnessing. Okay, Ashley. Next is the key elements of a CASA volunteer, and I'm going to invite Ashley to continue with that.
We tried really hard to make sure we weren't as rushed, and that's why you just saw me skip an activity. We knew that we were going to have a lot to get through tonight, so before we even started tonight, we bumped that into next week's session. So don't worry, or I say do worry, maybe you'll have to do that next week. You're not getting out of it. We do want to spend just a couple of minutes discussing with you the key elements of our court report, and Alondra's going to pop us to the next slide. And what we want to include in our court report are really basic identifying information of the child. And actually that's something that your supervisor will make sure is in the report, but we want to make sure it's there. We're going to report the activity that you've had. And when you're looking at those sample court reports, you'll notice that they're low, high, medium, but always a number in that top section of how many hours the CASA has spent visiting with the child. We'll include placement information, the case plan, and it puts in parentheses, if available, because they're not always available to us, but we do try to discuss that with them. The status of the case, so where they're at in that case plan, and then the way it's organized, we talk about the status of the child, family and community resources, issues and concerns, all kind of in the body of that report when we talk about the environment, the child's physical health, their school, their mental health, and then their visitation with their parents. We cover all of those in that grouping because we found that that's what the judge wants to know. It's a little easier for the judge and all of the other parties to read it when we do it that way, but we do want to make sure that there's a place for all of that valuable information that our advocates have worked together. So it covers all of that, how the child is doing with all of those things, who is involved in the child's life, and then any concerns that we have. And finally, at the bottom of our reports, you find the most important part, which are our recommendations and the justifications for those recommendations. So you'll see in your templates and in the examples that we give you that those recommendations and justifications are wide ranging. Sometimes they include things like, I want the child to be able to play baseball. And sometimes they're really serious, like, I think we should start pursuing the termination of the parents' rights. But either way, we make recommendations based on what we believe is in the child's best interest, and then we are sure to provide a justification for that. We don't put anything surprising in the recommendations or justifications. The judge and all the parties would have already had and read a lot of that information in the body of the report. We're just going to draw their attention to the reasoning that we have for making the recommendations that we do. We're telling you a little bit about the court report, and we're also going to just tell you a little bit about Optima because that's going to be part of your pre-work. We'll talk about that now as we're wrapping up here in the last few minutes. No, she's saying no. Oh, she's saying it's not on a slide. I'm like, did I skip something? Because we don't have time to skip something. I didn't skip anything. Don't worry. For the pre-work, we will have something really similar to what we had last week, the setup anyway. So if you're still struggling with Canvas, please let us know. I know many of you were intimidated maybe or overwhelmed by the number of assignments, and unfortunately it's going to be really similar, but we will send out the link tonight for you. I say the link with the email, so again, look for that Canvas Free for Teachers email and you will accept a new course. We did that because there's such a high volume of information in those. You'll accept the course and then it's going to look exactly the same as it did last week, but in that you will be asked to log into Optima and put a contact in. So we will ask you to do that in the homework. There will be some indicators and steps for you to follow. And if you have questions about Optima or if you continue to have questions about Canvas, please reach out to us and ask us. Any of those, you can do that, stay on tonight, you can ask tomorrow, and then of course we'll have the office hours as well. So as we're closing, we want to add 2 points. One, if you opened your envelope for tonight, you're really excited, you couldn't wait, and you opened it and you were disappointed because there wasn't any candy for anybody tonight. Instead, it was just a piece of paper. We will be asking you to sign up this week for your court observations. You will be doing that through Canvas, and then once you complete the court observation, we'll ask you to send that paper you found in your envelope back to us. We'll also be asking you to sign a virtual confidentiality form. We weren't totally aware that we needed those until after we'd already prepared your packet. So we apologize, don't freak out. Some of you are looking at me like I'm crazy going, it's not in my packet. It's not. We're gonna send it to you as a DocuSign. I'm seeing some like, oh, thank you. Yes, it's not supposed to be in there. We'll be sending you a DocuSign email before any of those court observations take place. Now, if you're a little panicked thinking, I don't want to go to court because of COVID, or isn't the courthouse closed? We're not asking you to, and yes, it is. But we are participating in court through Skype. We'll ask you to sign up for a spot to do your court observation. That's when we want you to use those headphones we provided. We'll want you to mute. There's some very clear instructions about that. And to stay in really close contact with Susan, because she is our court liaison. So when it is your time to jump in and be part of that court observation experience, to be in contact with Susan, because she's going to be the one that will let you know, yes, we're in the middle of a hearing now. It's not a good time to jump in. If you could wait 5 minutes, it would be a better time, or that the timing has changed and we're going to do a completely different case. So we will work closely with you guys through that as you're signing up. And that, which brings us to our office hours for next week. We will continue to offer those if you're signed up and you want to just come chat with us. If you're had a really exciting experience like Romaine did and got to see me mostly flip backwards out of my chair when I sat down in it during her office hours, you can just jump on for that kind of entertainment. If you continue to have questions, you can feel free to ask those there. And then if you would like for us to walk you through signing up and how that Skype court experience is going to go, we're more than happy to do all of those things during our office hours. If you don't have time for office hours, if you don't have questions, you feel really confident about your experience this far, you don't necessarily have to sign up for every week. We will definitely be checking in with each of you one-on-one as we progress through the training. So if you don't come to office hours, I say come, if you don't log on to Zoom for office hours this week, that's completely fine, but we'll probably check in with you in the next couple of weeks and be emailing back and forth. So I believe that brings us right up to 8 o'clock. And as promised, we are going to be closing out for the evening. We appreciate the time and focus that you guys have given to us this evening, and continue to value just the amount that you are willing to give back to these kids and families that are so in need in our community. With that, you can log off, but we will stay on for a few minutes if you have any more questions or any issues, or just want to hang out with us for a few more minutes on Thursday night. So thank you, and you are more than welcome to go if you need to.
I just have one question.
Yes.
By office hours, do you mean that time that we signed up for every Monday?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not the worst case scenario if I have to work over and miss that, if I don't have any questions.
It's the worst. Oh. No, it's not. It's not at all. And I see that you're in your car, and I don't know if Andrea is still on here or she's already jumped off, but on Monday I did her office hours from my car. She was in her car too. We were both laughing about it. So if you need to do it from your car, you can definitely do it from your car. If you have questions and it doesn't work out on Monday and you have questions on Wednesday instead, call us and set us up. We'll do it on Wednesday. Okay. But don't feel like if you don't have questions, then you have to show up, or we're not gonna like give you candy the next time. So
okay.
I see Susan making faces at Allie's sweet one there. Any other questions tonight?
I have a question.
Yes.
About the family court opposition that we're going to do.
Yeah.
It says time. What do we put on there?
I'm sorry, what was I didn't hear the question.
It's got time. It's got time on there. It's got
time. What time would work best for you?
Okay. Okay.
And that's the piece where we're going to work really closely with Susan on. So we want you guys to sign up, and then we're going to check with Susan to make sure that we have a case going on that week at that time. We typically have cases scheduled all day, every Tuesday, but occasionally it so happens that maybe there's a little gap where the judge is on a break, but we'll make sure with Susan that we can cover you for that time.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I just have one, like, for some reason, Optima will not let me in. Like, I've tried a couple times to log in and it won't let me in.
Thankfully, Robin is still on. She's already unmuting. She knew I was going to throw it to her. So Robin is our Optima guru. And if I know Robin, she's probably pulling Optima up on her screen right now so that she can either fix the issue or walk you through whatever the problem is. Am I right, Robin?
You are correct. Just give me a second.
Any other questions while Robin is working through that?
Which folders did you say are supposed to be empty? Yellow folders.
It's not empty. Folder number 2 has 2 pieces of paper and an envelope in it. It is missing the DocuSign document, which will be sent to you in the next couple of days. It will be your confidentiality statement. But folder number 2 should have 2 pieces of paper and an envelope in it.
Okay.
You look like that's not the case for you.
Mine is empty, and so is my week 5.
Okay.
I have
Shy is covering her mouth in horror.
I'm so sorry. I will personally deliver you a whole new kit. I'll actually talk to them tomorrow first thing, get some of your address info. I am so sorry about that. That was my mistake.
I have it up high enough that I don't think it was that my kids got into it.
Well, I would blame them for the M&Ms, but I don't think they stole this.
Yeah, I don't think they steal that.
So are full.
Yes. Okay. So we'll make sure that you get, and for this, we'll get it to you as quickly as possible within the next couple of days. But what you're missing is the form that you're going to fill out as you do the court observation, and then the envelope to mail back to us.
I can probably pop by there too.
Well, if you're in town, that works. But if not, we'll make sure to get it to your house.
Perfect.
Yeah, we do porch drop-offs all the time. So
thanks, guys. I'm going to log off.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oops.
Clara, Sandy, any other questions for tonight? No questions?
I don't think so. I think that's everything.
Good,
Thank
and
you,
I'm sure
Ashley.
you'll think of one later, or you can email us. If not, then that just means we did great tonight.
Absolutely.
Robin, you got it worked out yet?
Yeah, bear with me just a second. I'm going to test it.
Okay. Romaine, I'm sorry to hear that you're not feeling well. I know things are crazy all around the world with kids and school and work and allergies and everything else. So I can't say I'm surprised you're suffering from a migraine with all that, but I'm sorry to hear.
This is the one this week, which is unusual because I don't really get them that often.
I'm so sorry. And I'm totally impressed that you're bearing with my loud voice through all that.
You can't be any louder than my child. She's next door and I can still hear her. So it's fine.
Robin looks like on TV when you see like on CSI when it shoots to that like super smart person who's really dialed into their computer and really working hard. That's what she looks like right now. Like that intense, I know what I'm doing face. That's not what I look like when I'm on the computer.
Hold on, Romaine. Almost there.
Okay. I was even double checking to make sure. I said, did they spell like my last name wrong, maybe? And I'm typing it in like it's supposed to be that way, but in the system it might be wrong. That was like the only other thing that I could think of, because I've tried to log in 4 times and it won't let me in.
See, I forgot the D in your last name. So romaine.outerbridge.training. Let me save that.
Yeah.
I'll tell on myself, Romaine, because you've already seen me flip my chair. What harm can I do at this point? But I was sending an email with all of our advocates' names, and Alondra is like, what do you think her name is? And I'm like, Romaine, right? And it had auto-corrected to romance. And I'd sent it without double checking. I was like, oh man, how embarrassing. At least it didn't go out like to everybody that way. I'm so sorry.
Get romance, or it'll autocorrect to Roman.
Yeah, well, you got romance from me. Maybe I was just like doing lots of hearts that day. I don't know. But I corrected it.
When I type my own name in. So thankfully my iPad now knows that, you know, give her a minute and she'll type it out.
All right, Romaine, I got your missing letter in there and just signed on using your credentials. If you want to try real quick, you should be good to go.
Okay, let me try.
Carrie, every time we're on, I notice the hats in the background. She's always in a room that's got a display of hats back there.
Oh, cool.
I love it. I don't wear hats, but I love your hats.
Are those your Sunday hats or your derby hats?
Derby day hats, huh?
I got this one to go to the Oaks this year, and no Oaks.
You didn't get to go. Yeah. You can wear it to the office if you want.
Okay, I'll do that.
Please do. We'll have a dress-up day.
The other ones
day
are
of training, we'll ask everybody to wear a hat.
The other ones are my
Liven
grandmother's.
things up.
Yep, that worked.
Awesome. Great. Again, sorry about that.
That's okay. I wondered if it was just something like literally as simple as, I think there's a letter missing somewhere.
That's exactly what it was. So we appreciate you bearing with us and giving us the chance to fix it.
No problem. My last name's kind of long, so you lose a letter or two along the way.
Why can't everyone have a last name like me?
I tried to keep my daughter as short and simple as possible. So
yeah,
I love it.
I tell the story. Obviously, this is not my maiden name, but when I got married, my entire side of the family has always called me Sue, which I hate. So don't ever call me that. But my middle name is Kay, and then I married someone whose last name was Law, and then I got made fun of, and I was turned into a Chinese girl because I was Sue K. Law. So I always say now that my last name is so short, it's Susan Catherine. Even though
Stretch it out as much as you can. Stretch it out. All right. We appreciate it, Romaine. If you don't have any questions, we'll log off for the night. Let you get some rest and hopefully recover from that migraine.
I know. Thank you.
Hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Romaine.
Bye.